I was in the middle of teaching Hamlet's first soliloquy, the one he recited on the day of his father's funeral, to a room of teenagers when my cell phone buzzed in my pocket. I took a stealthy look. It was a text from my father. "Got lab results back. Call me and I'll bring you up to date." I'd forgotten that he had a biopsy performed on his hand. When I called him back at lunch, he was clearly upset. "I just needed to hear your voice. I have lymphoma." Lymphoma? On his hand? Wasn't the biopsy just on his hand? But even just on his hand is not a small thing to a composer and musician. My father's hands have created an eclectic musical career. At the age of 8, he asked his mother to teach him to write music. But instead of providing lessons, his mother directed him to the downtown Atlanta library, and he took a bus on his own at 8 years old, and he taught himself music theory. He also taught himself how to play the saxophone, and he played jazz clubs in Atlanta. This is the man who played with Ray Charles, Gladys Knight, and Muddy Waters before he was 16 years old. So the possibility of my father's hands not being able to hold the saxophone again, to not be able to create music again, was frightening. But there is strength in those hands. At 5'4", he was an amateur Golden Glove featherweight champion. But those hands also demonstrated restraint when he marched peacefully with Dr. Martin Luther King and was jailed with a famous civil rights leader. He learned that a fight could come from within. He told me stories about the training that he had to go through before he was allowed to protest. "You don't hit back," he said. "No matter how bad they hurt you, you don't fight back." My father was beaten by police because he sat with black friends at a Woolworth's lunch counter in Atlanta, Georgia. There was so much blood, he told me. In his youth, he had the strength to unflinchingly face adversity. But somehow, as he has grown older, the fear of dying has at times paralyzed him. He has lived expecting death. When I was 8, my father needed kidney surgery to remove a stone. The day before the surgery was my father's 27th birthday. My mother bought a cake, and I found a candle in the shape of a beer mug, which I thought would make my father laugh. Beerman, beer mug. My mother and I sang happy birthday in the kitchen, and my father sulked out of the bedroom, saw our cake, wiped the tears from his eyes, and then quickly returned to the bedroom to cry some more. He thought he was going to die on the operating table. He told his young son that he was going to die on the operating table. He didn't. You might have thought this would have traumatized an 8-year-old, but for me, his reaction was typical. I lived with this every day. And now, we have a new fear that could potentially result in my father's inevitable death: cancer. But like the villagers who become immune to the boy who cried wolf, I didn't know if his fear was real or not. I later found out that he asked the doctor, "Is this the thing that's going to kill me?" The doctor chuckled. "No, it won't be this that gets you." In fact, my father later admitted to me, after receiving a clear PET scan, that the thing he was worried about, that he was convinced was lurking in his body all of his life, was never actually there. "They scanned me from head to toe," he said incredulously. "Head to toe, and they found nothing. I thought they'd find something, but they found nothing." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before he knew that he wasn't going to die this time, he said, "I have lymphoma, and it's spreading, and I can't have radiation until at least next week." He, of course, was convinced that this thing is a ticking time bomb. And then I heard my mother in the background scream, wait a minute." My mother, who has always been my father's caretaker, protecting him with a lioness aggression, gets on the phone. "Wait," she said, "that's not what the doctor said. It hasn't spread. It's something that needs attention, but he's going to be okay." Then my father got back on the phone. He was going to have nothing to do with my mother's positive, rational calmness. But they're going to wait a whole week. And these doctors don't have a clue what they're doing. They don't care about what's going to happen to me. They just want to check my life off their to-do list, and then they move on to lunch. I finally interrupted him and asked, "What exactly are you afraid of?" He told me without hesitation, "I'm afraid of the unexpected. I can deal with just about anything, but I have to be prepared for what is about to happen." I asked him what he thought would happen if he wasn't prepared. "I don't know," he said. "And that's what scares me. I've never been through any of this before. And I don't have anyone but these silly doctors to explain to me what to expect, what is normal, what is inevitable." And then I remembered back to when my father turned 57. He spent that whole day rewriting his living will, preparing my mother with all the financial information he could think of, including all bank and credit card passwords, then spent the rest of the day in bed. Finally, 24 years later, I understand the source of my father's fear. My father is going through this life completely blind to what to expect as a man living beyond the age of 57. You see, he has lived his entire life thinking that his life would end at 57 because the men in his life, his father, his uncles, his brother, all died at 57. As a result, now at 81, he has been walking through uncharted territory. And the only truth within his reach, the only thing he can hold in his hands, is to prepare, to anticipate, to figure out what might happen before it happens so that he can react. It's not much to hold on to, but it's all that he has. My father was 19 when his father passed, and I was only a few months old. After the funeral, he wrote a poem called Lament. It was his own version of "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," the poem by Dylan Thomas. He wrote, "My father is dead, but my son, in my son he continues." I have the poem framed and hanging in the entry hallway of my home. My father continues to live beyond 57. Even I have passed that magical number 4 years ago. My father is trying to do for me what his father couldn't do for him, teaching me, neuroses and all, the complexities of growing old so that I will know what to expect beyond 57 and not fear the unknown.